Her. Bold. Brave. Her. With Dr. Pam Peak.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Pam Peak, and this is episode number 507 of the Bold and Brave Her podcast. Today I'm joined by Bob Roth. And I'm telling you right now, we are talking to one of the most experienced and sought after meditation teachers in America. And he's also one of my dearest friends. Bob, hello there.
Wonderful to be with you, Dr. Pam Peak, one of the most wisest and intelligent and enlightened and experienced physicians in America, and one of my dearest friends.
Okay, the check's in the mail. That's all I can say. We're doing the big payoff here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about meditation here, specifically transcendental meditation. And I want to know, everyone wants to know, why your life depends upon meditation.
Oh my gosh. Well, the expert on that would be Dr. Pam Peak. She's the one who can explain that. I actually would like to turn this into a kind of a conversation, if you don't mind, Dr. Pam Peak.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Part of this discussion.
We're hanging out right now, Bob. We're just everything here on the Her podcast. We just sit back and we kick back, let it rip, and what happens, happens. But look,
it all depends on balance. The reason why so much is needed now, why now almost more than ever, is balance. And the scales have tipped so much to non-stop activity, going and going and going, and everything in social media is going, and everything about advertising is go, 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 go. And we're burning out the machinery. We're burning out our brain. We're burning out our central nervous system. And meditation, properly understood and practiced, gives that balance. It gives that, in just a few minutes, gives access to a field of inner stillness, inner quiet, inner silence, that within as I said, a couple of minutes can transform the nervous system, digestive system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, limbic system, the whole, balance it out. So meditation is needed more than ever to provide balance in a life that's going off the rails as a whole, a whole culture.
You're the author of a New York Times bestseller, Strength in Stillness, the Power of Transcendental Meditation. That word stillness, for years it never really resonated with me because, of course, like everyone else out there, I was on the gerbil wheel and just running around like a crazy person. And I saw that title, Strength in Stillness. Wait a minute, stillness. Why did you write that book?
I wrote the book for several reasons. I wrote the book in 2018, and I'd been practicing transcendental meditation at that time for 40 years and been teaching it for 35. And I wanted to bring out the science of transcendental meditation. I wanted to bring out the benefits, but I also wanted to educate people about that. The fact the word meditation it's a generic term. And when you say I meditate, these days we now know from brain science that could mean any number of different approaches, and that they're not all the same. And while some of them may be evidence-based, still the impact they have is distinctly different than transcendental meditation. So I did it for educational purposes, and I did it for sharing my experience with something that I found personally very valuable, and found in my experience of teaching people, just like listening to you talk about the benefits of transcendental meditation. They're very real. And I wanted to share that with people.
I just think that this is so terribly important. And in full transparency out there, for years and years, I avoided meditation. I mean, it was a type quintuple A personality, always running around and achieving and doing my thing. And I never really understood, the real impact and benefit of this stillness, the strength in stillness. And until I had the absolute opportunity to meet Bob and his team, and I was absolutely fascinated with transcendental meditation. I'd flunked everything else. As I had shared with Bob a while back, I was very good friends with Herb Benson, who was the cardiologist who headed the Harvard Mind-Body Institute. And he wrote a book about the relaxation response. And right in front of him, he says, "Okay, Pam, I'm going to teach you the relaxation." I lasted 11 seconds. And then I opened my eyes and he looked at me. He says, "Oh my God, this is terrible." And I said, I became his greatest failure. I was an epic failure. And so I just sort of threw up my hands and said, this isn't going to work. And then when I met your wonderful team, specifically Mario and Linda, you had already whispered in their ears. You knew what was coming, and you said, "Oh, you're going to teach her, but she's also a triathlete, and she's out there beating her chest, and just accomplishing, achieving, and running around like a crazy person." And so they said, yes, we have an answer for her. So I showed up with great trepidation, and Mario stood up and he says, "Dr. Peak, we have exactly what you need." And I thought, like, what? And he said, "We have warrior meditation." And he decided to entitle it that. And I said, now we're talking. This resonates. I like this. Started growing hair on my chest just thinking about it, not really. So when Linda took me aside to teach me, it's a 20-minute meditation. She had the little clock and everything. I thought, I didn't do so well with 11 seconds, with the last try on a different kind of meditation. How am I going to do on this one? And do you know that I closed my eyes and I went to my strength and stillness. And the next time I opened my eyes was when she was gently telling me, we were finishing, and I looked up, it was 20 minutes. You just couldn't even wipe the shock off my face. How did that happen? And during that time, I just felt peace. I felt at peace. And even though my gerbil mind wanted to run around like a crazy, little mess in there, I think that the analogy that they used really worked with me. I'm a scuba diver. And when you're at the top of the water, you're getting kicked by the waves. And that's what's happening in real life. You're just getting kicked around. But as you descend 30 feet, 40 feet, it's just peaceful. And you just float. And you look to the right, look to the left, in front of you, behind you. It's eternity. It's just, that's what any scuba diver knows, this whole feeling. And that just hit me. And do you know, to this day, years later, I still think about that when I meditate. And now, my gosh, people are doing TM, everywhere now, because the science is so strong for this now. We're able to show what happens, with something we call restful alertness. Tell us about that, Bob.
Well, it's that balance. It's that state. So it's a fourth major state of consciousness. As you know, the Scientific American and Science in 1970, the first research was published in Science from Harvard. And the headline was a proposed fourth major state of consciousness, different from waking, dreaming, and sleeping. So the point here is this means that the experience is natural. It's actually in some ways it's also familiar because it's unique, yet it's familiar because it's your own innermost quiet self. But what it does is it's a state where you're settled inside, the mind is quiet and yet awake. As opposed to waking state where you're awake and buzzing, or sleep state where you're rested and unconscious, or dream state where you're some degree of rest, not a lot, and you're in another world. This is profoundly relaxing, profoundly comfortable, profoundly safe, secure. It's your own innermost self and yet awake. And the key to this, the reason why people meditate, is not for that experience, as you know, Pam, Dr. Pam. It's for how we feel afterwards. It's for the energy, the clarity, the discrimination, the discernment, the problem-solving ability, the resilience. That's why we're doing it, for the 10 hours afterwards. How has it helped you? First of all, how long has it been now you've been meditating?
My gosh, probably 15 years.
And when you look back, what would you say the first 2 or 3 most important, like when you think, this is Pam today, if this has changed, if I hadn't been meditating for 15 years, I wouldn't be like this.
I'm much more calm. I have a sense of calm. And in, my wild and crazy world where, I'm a Wall Streeter at the same time, I'm also working with nonprofits and, I'm dealing with people all day long. I find myself now much more liable to just stay calm in the midst of all the storms that descend upon us on a daily basis. There's this inner anchor of calm that's just grown and grown. And it gives me a chance to kind of take that deep cleansing breath. I could just sort of breathe through it and go, okay, now we're going to be fine. And, this could be almost anything. Maybe I'm on an airplane trip, and next thing you know, we have bad turbulence. I want to stay calm because I could get real anxious with that. Nobody really, enjoys any of this, right?
You opened this interview, this discussion, by saying, why is TM, or why is TM so important today? From a medical doctor, from a researcher, why is it so important today? What does TM do that just jogging or this or that or vegging out on a Netflix binge or something that doesn't do?
It's interesting. I decided to really entitle this, meditate. Your life literally depends upon this. As an athlete, I used to think that your life depended upon physical fitness, pretty much only. And then whatever mental fitness was associated with that was part of this whole sense of holistic health and well-being. But there's a whole component that's missing. And that whole component that's missing is literally going inward to a very deep and profound place of transcendence, peace, and calm. That's what's missing. And so instead of, everyone running around and reading their metrics off their Fitbit and their Oura Ring and, saying, well, look how healthy and, whatever I am, what you actually are missing is what cannot be found on the Oura Ring and the Fitbit. Now, that being said, when you are more calm, when you're able to control stress, as you know, Bob, I spent years at the National Institutes of Health in my laboratory studying stress hormone and what it does to the human body. And when stress is out of control, meaning you're running around and you're just so anxious and wound up, sort of like what you were talking about when you said, especially nowadays with so much going on in the world and wars and, all this stuff, and people absorb all that. Well, what it tends to do is it sets up a pro-inflammatory state throughout the entire body. This pro-inflammatory state is the foundation for disease, everything from metabolic disease to cancer. And so what you want...
Why is that? What is it about inflammation? You hear, now I'm interviewing you. You hear this a lot. Inflammation is why is inflammation so bad? I mean, I know about inflammation if I get a bee sting or I get an infection, and then, okay, that's good. I got an infection. I put some ointment or something antibacterial. But why is inflammation so bad? And what does it have to do with like heart disease?
This is a different kind of inflammation. When you had your little bee sting, your body was fantastic. It went right to the little area, sent all those cells over there to help fight, this little, sting or whatever you got. And that is perfect. That's acute. That's in the moment. That is exactly what the body was meant to do. So that's acute stress. You were stressed out, like, oh my gosh. And your body was biologically stressed. It's like, ouch, I don't need this, all right, fine. But then there's chronic stress. We hear this word all the time now, chronic illness, chronic stress. Chronic stress is interwoven with chronic illness. So when the body is now challenged by maintaining a higher level of stress hormone, that's cortisol, as we know, throughout the body, that's abnormal and that's not good. So that's what happens when we get wound up mentally, when we're also suffering. We could have a bodily, biological, physiologic something that's really bothering us. So now we're suffering with that. And when that occurs, you have this foundation throughout your cells where there's a vulnerability to take that inflammation and to stir up an inflammatory response in all kinds of parts of your body. For instance, the word itis, like colitis, okay? Anything that ends in itis, bronchitis, right? Dermatitis, right? All of those things mean inflammation of whatever that may be, right? And so what happens is with chronic inflammation from stress that's just, what does stress lead to? Terrible sleep, very bad sleep. It leads to poor choices in how you eat. It's grab and go. There's no real thought or planning because you're too stressed out. You're not getting enough exercise. And so you're more sedentary. And all of these things add up. You see, it's almost a domino effect. And then when all of this comes together, what you then have is a body that's literally on fire. And it sets up this inflammatory issue in your organs, your mind, your brain, right? And so this is one of the reasons why we need to tamp it down. People don't think about that. They actually pride themselves. I only had 4 hours of sleep last night. And you're happy about this? Come on now. This is the worst thing you could have done. Or you blow it off. It's a little, colitis. I have some rotten gut thing. Well, wait a minute. You've got a trillion little friends with benefits down there in your microbiome that would like a little love and nurturing here. How about that? And so this is one of the reasons why it's so terribly important physiologically to tamp down that inflammation. One of the ways you can do that is to go to Command Central. Where's this inflammation coming from? Your brain, right? Your mind, how you're perceiving things, how you're organizing things using your frontal lobe, how you're able to plan for better sleep, etc. So once you start a positive domino effect with a healthier lifestyle, now we're talking. And that's one of the reasons why your life literally depends upon stillness. It depends upon your ability to take that time. And please do not tell me, I don't have time. What do you mean you don't? 20 minutes. Okay, you've got 24 hours in that 20 minutes. So I'll tell you what's really cool is what Bob has set up, and it all began with COVID. Tell them what you started doing. It's been 5 years ago.
Twice a day. When you learn Transcendental Meditation, you can do it on your own. It's just done sitting comfortably in a chair for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. But when COVID came along and people were isolated, then the thought came up, it would be nice to be able to have, like, people were looking for community, they were looking for support. So on March 13th, 2020, decided that for 2 weeks, I would just at 7 in the morning and at 6 in the evening, just give people an opportunity to call in on a Zoom line, audio, and that I would talk for a few minutes, and then people would just silently meditate for 20 minutes, and then they come out, finish the I'd take them and tell them when their 20 minutes was up, and then I'd read a quote from Lao Tzu or Anais Nin or somebody, some wise soul. And it just caught on, and it went from 2 weeks now to 5 years, and there's like maybe 50,000 people or more have participated at one time or another, and now regularly 6, 7, 8,000 people. And anyone can join, whether they do TM or not, although most people, once they start joining in, do want to learn TM. But it's been great. It's been really great. How is it? How have you call in every morning, don't you?
So, yeah. And I do my TM by myself later on because the 6 p.m. time is a little tough for me because of the work I do, especially with California. So I have to, sort of continue some of my work. But, it came at a very fortuitous time. I didn't know you were doing this 2-day thing. When the lockdown happened, my best friend Naomi and I would call routinely at 7 in the morning to connect, and we would catch up with life in general. And it was like a lifeline for me because I felt so, my family and I felt so isolated. Everyone did. We were terrified. Like, what's going on with the world? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And yet hearing Naomi's voice was all I needed more than anything else. It was just hearing Naomi's voice, calm me down. And it was wonderful. And prior to talking to Naomi, I would usually do my TM, when I got up in the morning. And as many of you know, because I noted this a while back, Naomi picked up the Delta virus in 2021, and she passed away on the winter solstice. And this was my best friend. And I remember waking up in the morning and going for my phone and wanting to call her, as I always do at 7 in the morning. It was just, we'd done it for so long. And I couldn't. And I was just numb with grief. And then I called one of our wonderful colleagues, Dr. Norman Rosenthal, who has written so beautifully on TM and was also my faculty associate and collaborator at the National Institutes of Health. So I called him up and, I was just talking to him because he knew Naomi as well. And he said, "Do you know that Bob is doing this Zoom audio with TM at 7 a.m. So I had this gap in my life at 7 a.m. And immediately, like a small miracle, you filled it. And I've never looked back. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so important to me, because it occurred at such an important time in my life when all of this total insanity was going on with all of our lives. We felt like we literally, and we didn't have any control. So that's one of the things that's, so terribly important. Now, you've been heading up the David Lynch Foundation for many years. Tell us about that.
So the foundation was established by the great iconic filmmaker who recently sadly passed away, David Lynch. He did Twin Peaks TV series. He did Mulholland Drive, many other films. He started it in July 2005. And the idea, Pam, was to bring transcendental meditation for free initially to under-resourced kids who are living at or below the poverty level, who suffer from high levels, they call it adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, which says that if a child starting in the womb is in an environment of drugs, of divorce, of violence, of fear, gunshot, any of those things, if they have 3 or 4 of those adverse childhood experiences by the time they're 8 or 10, they're in pretty much a pipeline to prison or obesity or intimate partner violence. So we wanted to bring this tool to kids. And so we initially did. We brought it to over 1 million kids in the US and around the world, but now the foundation has expanded to anyone who's living in trauma. And so that's really everyone, but we have healthcare, frontline healthcare workers, we have police and firefighters. We've taught in New York City alone, we're teaching. It's what a change in time. The New York Police Department Foundation is paying for police officers in New York City to learn TM. The fire department in New York City is paying for firefighters to learn TM. There are many hospitals in New York City that are paying for their doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers in intensive care units and also in emergency rooms to learn TM. So the David Lynch Foundation was established to bring the technique to people who are in need. And now our focus is to actually fund the large-scale studies, what they call phase 3 clinical trials.
Okay, now hold on now. Before you keep doing that, excited. What I know you're getting incredibly excited. When we come back, I want to hear more about these trials and how the entire program is expanding. The Her Podcast is sponsored by Solaray Vitamins, Minerals, and Herbs, all rooted in nature. In addition to women's multivitamins, Solaray, Solaray, is presenting the new Her Life Stages products, providing support for the menstrual years, including PMS, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, and even libido. This integrative holistic approach has a woman's back throughout her entire life journey. To learn more about Her Life Stages, you've got options. You can run on over to your local health food store or check it out at Whole Foods, Sprouts, Amazon, or scroll over to solaray.com and use promo code HER20 for 20% off your purchase. Women, Solaray's got your back. And we're back. All right. So now you got me excited. What's going on here? I mean, I can't believe the police and the firefighters are paying for this. This is wild.
Well, they're doing it because people don't know the number one cause of death among firefighters and police officers is not line of duty. It's suicide. And what do you give tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of frontline first responders? You're going to put them all on some drug. You're going to get all of them have talk therapy. It's not practical. It's not effective. Well, transcendental meditation is an evidence-based, means proven by science, evidence-based, practical, scalable healthcare intervention that can be taught to anyone, and that they have that tool with them for the rest of their lives.
And doctors need it too.
Pardon?
Doctors have a very high suicide rate.
And I just read where women live like 5.8 years longer than men in general, but that women physicians have a much earlier death rate than men physicians. And that women suffer from 2 or 3 times the levels of PTSD. So it's a very great issue. I'd actually like you to talk about this. Is it true that most of the research on human beings for drugs has been mainly on men and not women? And it's only now that numbers are increasing?
When I came to the National Institutes of Health, I mean, honestly, there was more research on a rare disease called breast cancer in men than there was in breast cancer in women.
No.
Yeah, it was. It was sad. And so, you know, when it comes to drugs, we made horrible mistakes. What was good for a man may be disastrous for a woman, and vice versa. And it was when Bernadine Healy became the first woman director of the National Institutes of Health in the 1990s, that she laid down the law. And she said, if you want a dime for funding for any of your studies out there, then if whatever you're studying involves men and women, you include both. You will not include one or the other. So if it's heart disease, lung, everything that affects both sexes, then you have to include a woman or it will not be funded. And that was not taking place prior to when Dr. Healy came on board. And now everyone's feet are held to the fire about this. It's like, come on now, And when it comes to drugs and the rest of it, the drug companies had to start ponying up with the same thing for the FDA. And, there's still lag and, there's still inequity and all the rest of it. I certainly never inferred that everything was hunky-dory, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was.
No, this is going to sound incredibly naive, but I don't understand why for decades, why would they not include women in a study, in a trial?
Oh, that was, I kind of stumbled on a little bit of this. I kind of figured it out on my own. But when I started my work in my laboratory and I wanted to, I was beginning to initiate some clinical trials, I heard a lot of, kind of murmurings like, are we going to have women? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean we're going to have women? Why are you saying it that way? And they said, well, they have menstrual cycles. It screws up everything. And I'm like, are you kidding me? All right, let's all take a deep cleansing breath here. All right. Now, the mice that you study are male and female. The mice have an estrus cycle, just like a woman does. So I don't hear you complaining about that. And of course, I got dead silence on that. And I said, so something? If we have to plan around specific, issues as they relate to menstrual cycles, then we will. And that's exactly what we started to do. It was like we're more complex. Women are more complex. And so they're more of a hassle, to have to deal with. And that was the issue. And then there were practical things like, women have kids and they can't be really, it's hard for them to be participants in trials because they have so much on their plate. Well, why do they have so much on their plate? Why are we going back to trying to help them out in the first place? But, silly me, but at the end of the day, what I love about the David Lynch Foundation has done, you're looking at PTSD among war veterans, among, firefighters, police, and, hopefully doctors, and obviously people, especially children, who desperately need that quiet. Can you imagine, as a child's brain is developing, the frontal lobe, which is the CEO of the brain, where you strategize, organize, and the rest of it, is not fully formed until the age of 25. Now, when you have a child, and you said the adverse childhood experiences, or the ACE, they have a scoring system for ACE. These kids are trying to grow their brain throughout their childhood and their teen years. When they have extraordinary abuse, and it could be just simply neglect, gross neglect, let alone physical abuse, sexual abuse, and all the rest of it, or whatever combination thereof, then that leaves a mark on their, what we call the epigenetics. And that means that they now carry with them a greater vulnerability toward the things you just said: obesity, depression, suicide, drug addiction, or just addiction per se, including alcoholism, dropping out, all of these
even
things.
Intimate partner violence later in life.
Oh, of course. I mean, it just follows. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so terribly important to grab them. There's other studies that have actually shown that a lot of people go into military and police. A lot of those people have had a significant, very abusive and challenging childhood and adolescence. And they actually go into law enforcement and military because they will have greater control over their life, which they never had growing up. But the problem is unless they've had some pretty good counseling and support along the way, it's very difficult for them to really maintain long-term relationships. For instance, domestic violence between married couples, say for instance, who are in law enforcement, that's very high.
And people on the other side of the bars. I mean, what is the history of these men and women who are behind bars? It's like got to be almost 100%. There's been high levels of ACEs. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen without those ACEs. So I have another question. When we talk about the David Lynch, and this is great because I always wanted to interview you, Pam, and I'm turning the tables because you're so articulate. But one of the areas, the David Lynch Foundation, we estimate that of the 1.5 million people that we've taught, given scholarships around the world in 35 countries, 80% are women. 80% of the people who have learned TM are women. And now we have established our own Women's Health Initiative, of which Dr. Peak is on the National Advisory Board and also on our medical council. And why do you think at this time TM is so important for women?
Well, I bet a lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, 80% are women?
Yeah, because they're much more sensitive. They're more intuitive. They gravitate towards it. It's voluntary. Like when and also we're in professions like nursing, where the majority of nurses are women. So anyway.
Well, there's also another thing too, and that is, the ability to take care of oneself and seek help. Men have a real problem making that appointment for the doctor. To be able to get in and have something checked out and take good care of themselves, that annual, skin exam or, whatever, it just sort of slips right on by. Meanwhile, women are like, OCD. They've just already got it on their calendar and they're just on top of it. Of course, I'm being grossly, general about this, but we already have great research that shows that women are the ones who really control that calendar for all the self-care stuff that happens. And men, oftentimes, especially generationally, I'd say guys, who are 60 and over, have always had a little bit of an issue with keeping up with all of that. I'd say younger men are a little bit more attuned to their bodies and are asking more questions and becoming early adopters of all kinds of new self-care, modalities out there. So I think that, it's a generational thing too. But women are very attuned to the need to get this stillness, because I'll tell you one thing, most of them learn the hard way, just like me. There you are running around like a crazy person saying to yourself, there's got to be more than this. This is nuts. You wake up in the morning and you hop on the gerbil wheel and off you go. Wait a minute. And the way I looked at it as an athlete, I was thinking about this. The first time I descended into the Grand Canyon, I did the rim to rim over 2 days, staying at Phantom Ranch. And as I was doing this, we were keeping up a pretty good clip on the hike. And this is a very advanced hike, starting with the north rim, ending up on the south rim. And so as I was going along, I was thinking to myself, here we are, we're so kind to ourselves as we're hiking. We say, okay, everyone, right now be a really good time to just take a moment now. We're going to take a moment. And then we find some boulders or something, because we're descending deep into the canyon to the Colorado River at the base. And you sit there on that boulder and you think, oh, this feels so good. My body and my mind, we're loving this. All right. And then you get up again because it's ludicrous to think that you just keep marching along hour after hour without
is genius, Dr. Pam Peak. Keep going, but this is a genius story.
It's just, it's perfect. And so, we already know that the rule is you have to make it to Phantom Ranch by a certain time or you don't get dinner. So, and you're starving to death. It's like, you get about 3,000 calories at one time because they have this big ass dinner waiting for you. But there's a schedule for the dinners. And there's only a certain number of people who are allowed down at the base and going to Phantom. So in the back of your mind, it's like, we'll take a rest, but we're going to rock and roll right after that. And there you go. Well, then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. All day long, you wake up in the morning and your mind is hiking. It's hiking along. It's doing the Grand Canyon on a daily basis. And yet, for some reason, people think it's like, you're a loser if you say, oh, I need a moment of stillness. I need a moment. I need a moment to, just rest my mind. No, you're a loser. What's wrong with you? Keep it rocking here so you can just burn out. So going literally physically hiking, right? You will most definitely burn out physically. No question about it. Hands down. Right? But when it comes to mental, we just blow it off. Just keep doing it until you just burn out and then you collapse in a small heap. So what I always do in my mind is I envision that my brain has just found a little boulder and my brain just parks itself right on top of the boulder and it goes, okay, now I'm going to meditate. And I'm just going to just chill out, take a nice deep breath, and I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to enjoy some stillness. And that's going to help me when I come out of my stillness to be able to even, enjoy and embrace my life even more. Because that's what happens when we rest in the Grand Canyon. It's like, okay, now we're back to the hike. Loving it. Look at these beautiful trees. Look at that. Rattlesnake. All of these things going on in your life. So that's the analogy in my brain. What do you think? The genius of nature.
No, I think it's brilliant. And I want to make a few points since people may be just, coming in on this, another one of Pam Peak's amazing podcasts. And that is when we talk about stillness, the lovely thing about transcendental meditation is because some people say, well, my mind isn't still. And I've tried meditations where they tell me to clear my mind of thoughts or create stillness, and I can't do it. So meditation is not for me. Well, in transcendental meditation, we don't try to create, in that analogy of the ocean, choppy waves on the surface. We don't try and stop the waves on the surface. There's a vertical dimension to the ocean. And at the deeper levels of the ocean, we find naturally silence, stillness, quiet, equanimity of the ocean. Mind is the same. Surface of our mind is the active gotta monkey mind. There are some types of meditation that ask us to try and, clear the mind of thoughts, try to suppress those waves. So hard to do. Transcendental meditation, when we learn from a certified teacher, a person who's qualified, graduate level training to teach a person to meditate. And that includes giving them what's called a mantra, their own mantra, which is a couple of syllable word or sound that has no meaning. So the teacher would give you a mantra and then teach you how to use it silently, effortlessly. So just gently and naturally, we go from that surface heated level of the mind and we experience deeper, quieter, calmer levels automatically and effortlessly. Anyone can do it. I teach 10-year-old children with ADHD or on the autism spectrum disorder who couldn't close their eyes ordinarily for half a minute, and they end up meditating for 10, 15 minutes and loving it. And we teach people like Dr. Pam Peak, brilliant scientists, researchers, architects, business people, moms and dads, grandma, anyone can do it. All religions, it doesn't matter. There's no faith in this. There's no belief. It's you can be a skeptic. That's why Pam does it. You can be a skeptic and the technique works just fine. So I just wanted to make that point that this is not a contrived thing When Dr. Peak talks about that stillness, that quiet, it's there. We've just lost access to it.
That's actually a brilliant way to put it. So at the end of the day, how do people learn more about TM and how to learn it, from how do you find a teacher and how does all of this come together, Bob?
It's a simple thing. Go to tm.org, for Transcendental, tm.org, and right there you can find out where there's a TM center or a certified TM teacher in your area. Because you really want to learn this. There's a lot of knockoffs and whatever people claiming, but you really want to get a person who's certified, who's got the proper training. And right there, you can find out how to learn it. It takes about an hour a day, something like that, over 4 consecutive days to learn. It can be done in person and digital at home, or it can be done all in person. You can talk to a TM teacher and find out how to do it, but how to learn. But it's, sometimes people will say to me, Dr. Pam, they'll say, well, I already do mindfulness or I already do this. And I say, it's okay. It's not an either or here. This is a yes and. You can learn, you can do mindfulness, vipassana, you can have do your rosary in the morning. It's yes and. It's not either or, it's yes and. They support each other. So I always say it's a relatively short life. It's a great time to learn new things and give it a try.
I love the yes and. People sometimes get a little crazy, when they're saying only do one thing.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
it's a yes and.
That doesn't work for me because I'm a free mind and, I like cobbling things together in a way that works for me. So I love prayer. I think, so I have my own prayers and I find, great comfort there. But for my mind, to be able to be still, just like, putting my little brain right on that boulder, I find that the TM experience really is extraordinary. And I was surprised and stunned by how powerful it is. And now that I've been doing it for years, I'm just saying that, I'm standing here now 15 years later, just blown away by the fact that it's actually effortless and there's nothing, you're not trying to do anything. So that's the thing. So I'd like everyone out there in the Her Podcast land, to just consider the and part of this. Whatever you're doing, we're going to give you an and part of this too. And that's where TM is. And now you understand how unbelievably important it is to meditate, to take a moment to find the strength, in stillness, and why your life literally depends upon it, because we now know that doing this will decrease that inflammatory response that I was talking about before, and literally will save your life. So, give it a whirl and, explore. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all, just like Helen Keller said. All right. Could you just say one more time, Bob, the website? And
yes. But before that, I have to say something. In my 50 plus years of teaching Transcendental Meditation and running this foundation, I have worked with, not an exaggeration, thousands of doctors, literally thousands of doctors in the U.S. and around the world. And you, Dr. Pam Peak, are at the top. You are eloquent, wise, you speak from your own experience, just skillful communicator. And it's always an honor for me to do anything with you. And I just have to tell your listeners, you're very fortunate to be tuning in and taking not just on this, but all of her podcasts, the wisdom of this woman, really amazing. And you just go to I'm not going to let you diminish that. I'm just going to go right into this. Go to tm.org, find out where there's a teacher in your area, find out how you can find more information. Before, in order to learn, you got to educate yourself. So find out where you can get more information. And then if you decide to do it, you'll love it. You will never regret it.
Bob, what can I say? Thank you so much. I really for shedding so much, wisdom and knowledge about, what you've been doing for the last literally 50 years. It just sort of blows my mind.
I know.
So thank you once again for sharing this with our wonderful Her podcast community. And I just want everyone to just run on over to tm.org and scope it out. Just scope it out. That's what you need to do. And I also want to thank my sponsors, Solaray, Solaray, vitamins, minerals, and herbs rooted in nature, and their new Her Life Stages products. So scope it out at solaray.com and remember the promo code HER20 for 20% off. And, take a moment now and leave us a review because we'd love to hear from you. This has just been such a great episode. And this has also been a production of Podcast Health. And remember, as we end this episode, remember your time in this world may be limited, but the things you can do with this time are not. So get on out there. Carpe diem, seize the day, everyone. And thanks for listening.